Hey everybody, welcome to Monday's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. This is episode number 324 of our YouTube channel and podcast, and I cannot be more excited to continue sharing with you guys personal finance topics that I think can be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. Today, we are going to be talking about some budget hacks, right? Some things that are going to be very specific to your life and things that you can implement immediately, regardless of where you're at. Now, you may have already implemented some of these things, but it's perfectly fine for us to at least review them, review why they are important, and review exactly how having your budget in check and having a budget in the first place can get you to a place financially where you can be financially successful, know what's going on with your money, and be a good steward of your finances all the way through any financial plan that you're working, regardless of what the steps are. If you budget and budget effectively, you can be an effective money manager. So stick around for a discussion of all that and more in today's episode. Before we get started though, if you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcasts, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual watching or listening to this show on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you review the financial action plan, you review the plan that I have laid out for you guys that I think is the best way, the most efficient way for you to build wealth over time, and you say, what is just the first thing that you need to do? What's the first thing that needs to happen in the financial action plan so that I can be financially successful? I tell you, the first thing that I think you need to do is budget uniquely on a monthly basis, right? The importance of doing so cannot be understated, because I mean, if you know where your money's going and you know where your money's coming from, then there's nothing that you can't do financially, right? As long as you know where your money's coming from, you know where your money's going, you can actually diagnose the problems that you have financially, right? If you don't know the answer to those questions, then you can't even diagnose what the problem is. You can't even tell me why you may have financial struggles. You can't even tell me where you need to begin in cleaning up your financial life, right? But if you know where you're at, if you know, either I have an income problem, or I have a problem with my spending, or, maybe I, spend too much on this, or I spend, maybe too little here, then I can bump that up a little bit, or maybe I don't give and I can find a way to give, or maybe I don't invest and I can find a way to invest. All these different things, all these different problems that we can have in our financial lives, we can fix them very easily if we just properly budget. Now, the problem, most people don't take the time out to do it, right? Most people do not take the time out to budget. They don't take the time out to do the simple things, right? And if you would just do the simple things, then all the other things can fall into place very easily. People think that personal finances is very complex. They think that finances in general are just complex. They think investing is complex. They think that all these things should be super nuanced at all time. And there are plenty of options. There are plenty of things you could do, right? But many of the times, if you just do what is simple, right? Do what is simple and makes a whole lot of sense, then you don't have to do something that's complex, right? And you're likely to get better outcomes than if you tried to make it any more complex than need be, okay? So I want to talk about 6 budget hacks to get your financial life on track. I think that's, something that, if we can find ways to hack our budget, we can find little things that we can do to make our budgets better. We can find little things that can make our money management more effective. Then why not take advantage of them? Okay, so let's just start from the top. the first thing is to separate your bank accounts. Okay. So what I'm suggesting here, have a separate checking account that is just dedicated to paying your monthly recurring bills, such as rent or mortgage, electricity, gas, and cell phone bills. Right? Figure out the total owed and set up a transfer into the account for that amount each time you get paid. So if you're paid twice a month, split the number in half and make 2 transfers. Right? At the end of the month, use that money towards your recurring bills. And then you can pay those bills even with a credit card, and then pay them off completely every month. Pay that credit card off completely every month with the money that you put into this account. And so your bills will be paid, your credit card will be paid off, you won't have any fees, and you can build up some credit. Now, another advantage to this, right? So obviously the first advantage here. The first advantage here is that you can build some credit, but do so in a way that is responsible, right? You're just paying your bills, and you're just paying your bills with the amount of money that you set aside in order to do so. Right. And so your bills, these rent, mortgage, electricity, gas, phone bills, these should be things that are at least semi-fixed. Right. Your rent, your mortgage is probably fixed. Your cell phone bill is probably fixed. Electricity and gas is going to vary a little bit, but at least you have a general idea of where those values should fall. Right. And if you can set aside that amount of money and then use a credit card in order to pay those bills and then just pay them off out of one specific account where you set money aside in order to do so, that can be a very effective way to build credit without having to get into this place where, maybe you feel this, this temptation to go and spend money unnecessarily on a credit card. That credit card only being used for some of the big things. And so this can build you credit, but something else that this can do is it can allow you to see where all of your other money is being spent. Right? A lot of people like to blame a lot of the big things, a lot of the big expenses that they have on the reason that they don't have money. Right? But if you get those things out of the way and you have this other account, this other checking account that is just for all of the other things that you spend money on in your financial life, then at least you'll know that maybe your discretionary spending is out of whack. Right? If you're ending up with no money left over, it's very likely that your discretionary spending and the money that you're spending out of that other pile of money is out of whack. And then you can start to diagnose some of the problems in your financial life, right? But ultimately, this is just a really good hack in order to build credit, but you'll also be able to examine your financial life a little closer, examine what you're doing with money a little closer, and be more clear on the fact that it may not be your mortgage or it may not be your rent that's breaking your back. It may be a bunch of trips to Starbucks, or it may be a bunch of times that you eat out, or it may be all the clothes that you bought, or whatever, right? It could be any number of those things, but separating a couple of bank accounts could be really useful. Now, that being said, if you are a married individual, both of those bank accounts should be in the name of you and your spouse. When I say separate, I do not mean separate individuals. That does not align with what I teach on the show, and it will never align with what I teach on the show because we want to work together as a married couple. So that's the first budget hack that I have for you. The second is to simplify. Now, what do I mean? Well, what I mean is that you need to organize your debt. Okay, you need to make things simple on yourself when it comes to your debt. Many times, so many individuals, they have student loans, they have car notes, they have their credit card debt, they have their medical bills, they have all these different things in all these different places, right? And they don't quite know exactly how to get to paying on them in an effective way. Well, first and foremost, you need to organize them. And I've told you to do this before, but just not in the context of these 6 things, right? But you need to organize your debts, and you need to organize them in one specific way, right? You could do it by the type of debt. You could do it by the interest rate. You could do it by the due date. You could do it by all those things. But what I think you need to do it by is the amount. Right, the size of the debt that you have. Because ultimately what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to pay off our debts from smallest to largest, because we can build some momentum, right? We can build momentum in the way that we pay off debt if we have them lined up from smallest to largest. Now, if you don't have any debt, then this obviously doesn't apply to you, right? But if you do have debt, then having where you pay on those debts lined up in your budget properly, lined up from the smallest debt to the largest debt, will make it very easy for you to understand why you're doing what you're doing in your debt payoff program, right? You'll pay off the smallest one and then roll that payment into the next and into the next and into the next as you continue to pay them off, right? And this is going to allow us to get some momentum when it comes to paying off our debt. Now, it's not doing it by interest rate, which is quote unquote the least costly way to do so, right? But if you have a huge debt that's at a low interest rate and you're never getting it paid off, right? You're not getting any type of win. You're not getting any type of momentum with this particular type of debt. Even though it may be less costly, it may take you a lot of time with that first big debt. And that's going to be kind of demoralizing when you could, ramp your way up to that bigger debt and then have a lot more money to throw at it every single month by the time you get around to it using the debt snowball method, right? So you need to know where your debts are. You need to know what debt you're going to pay on first. You need to know the amount that you're going to put on each debt, right? But it needs to be well organized. I would even say that external to your budget, right? Having these amounts lined up, having these particular debts lined up is super important. Again, I've told you guys this before. If you have, let's say, student loans, you may have, national average $38,000 in student loan debt, right? So you may have that much in student loan debt, but that student loan debt is likely made up of several different loans, right? Take each individual loan and you can pay on each individual loan on all of these sites, right? You can go and decide which loan you want to pay on at any given time. And so my suggestion is have each of these loans from smallest to largest and pay them off as such. And that'll allow you to get some faster wins and make you feel like you're making a lot of progress in your financial life and paying your debt off. Right? So ultimately, why are we doing this? Ultimately, why does this matter? Why is this a budget hack? Right? This is a budget hack because it helps to eliminate clutter in your mind about your debts. Right? And it allows you to have some clarity when it comes to attaining this goal of getting all your debts paid off and being debt free. Right? If we can have clarity about this idea and make this idea as organized as possible and attack it in an organized way, then we can be successful in making sure that we do one of the primary things that is going to be a success indicator for us long term in our financial lives, and that is get out of debt. Okay, so simplify. That is the second budget hack that I have for you. The third budget hack that I have is to hit the pause button. Okay. So before you buy an item that catches your eye, I need you to stop. Okay. And if you're in a store, walk around and do the rest of your shopping, right? If you're buying online, keep the items in a basket for a day or two before hitting the buy button. Okay. It'll give you an opportunity to really consider if a purchase is necessary or not. Look, some of the things that just tear most people's budgets apart is this, compulsory spending. Right? Is this spending money on things that are completely unnecessary? Look, I'm glad that, my wife, she'll set up these lists on Amazon, and these lists are a mile long, right? But she is very smart about not buying everything, right? And not buying, too much at any one time and all these types of things, right? But there are so many people who do not have this type of discipline, right? This discipline that is required to not just look on Amazon and just, keep clicking add to cart, and then buying whatever's in your cart, right? It requires discipline. It requires you having some understanding of how much money you have and exactly how much money you have to spend at any given time. I know that there's a reason that there's this thing called retail therapy, right? Because people feel better a lot of times if they go out and buy themselves things that they like. I'm privy to that fact. I understand that, right? But there's so many times when we don't have the money, right? We haven't planned for it. It's not budgeted for. It's not something that we're planning to spend money on, right? And so before we go and just blow the budget, right, we need to hit the pause button. We need to give ourselves a second to think. Because a lot of times if we'll just give ourselves a second, right, give ourselves a little bit of time, we will begin to think rationally, right? Or at least I know I do. I begin to think rationally if I just give myself a moment, right? You give yourself a second, you'll start to think rationally. And when you're thinking rationally, I can typically talk myself out of a purchase. Now, many may say I would do that to a fault, right? I can talk myself out of many purchases, maybe sometimes even things that I need, right? But the whole idea is not to talk you out of things that you need. The whole idea is to talk you out of doing things that are compulsory, things that are going to break your budget, and things that are going to keep you from doing the things that you say you're going to do in your budget. Because I know that you may want to get out of debt, and I know that you may want to save and invest for your future, and I know you may want to invest for your kids, or I know you may want to buy big Christmas presents for people, right? But if you don't do the proper things to make sure that that happens, to make sure that that budget holds, like not overspending because you just felt like it, or like you just really like these items, or really like this this clothing, or really needed this electronic device, whatever, right? If you can keep that in check, keep those feelings in check, keep those actions in check, because ultimately it's not just the feelings, it's the actions. It's the actually going out and purchasing those things. And if you can just hit the pause button, and you can just wait, and you can be patient in purchasing some of these things, ultimately you could likely get around to purchasing them, right? But we need to make sure that we properly plan for them. And if they're not properly planned for in our budget, they do not need to be purchased. Okay, our budget gives us permission to spend money, right? But it does not give us permission to spend money on anything and everything that we want. Okay, so hit the pause button, and it will help you to maintain your budget over time. Now, the fourth budget hack that I have for you guys is to make adjustments. Okay, don't just set your budget for a month and forget it. Instead, think of it as a living, breathing document. Okay, check on it periodically to make sure you're on track. If you aren't, you can adjust. Right? You are changing the plan, but you're making a more realistic plan, and one that you can achieve by the end of the month. Let's not act like at the beginning of every month you know what's going to come up over the course of that month, because the truth of the matter is that we don't. Right? We don't know certain things that are going to come up. Many things can come up over the course of the month, right? God forbid you drive out of the driveway tomorrow and you get a flat tire, right? And now you're looking, you go, well, I've got a flat tire. I could get a used tire, right? That's still going to cost me money. Okay. Or, I've got these other tires that are equally as old as the one that just went flat. That just went out on me. And, should I buy 4 used tires or 4 new tires? Should I go ahead and bite the bullet and do something like that? Do I have the money to do something like that? Right. These are decisions that we have to make. Right. And we can make these decisions, and we can reallocate our cash, and that's perfectly fine. Right. But if we make a decision that is going to spend money that we have allocated elsewhere for a particular month, then we need to go back and we need to basically redo the budget, right? Obviously, you're not going to have to redo every line item, but redo the line items that you're currently dealing with, the ones that either you're overspending on for the month, or the ones that weren't even in the budget that now are in the budget and you're going to have to spend money on, right? I think there are a lot of emergencies that occur that, if, let's say, you're making enough money, or you're in this certain place in life where you can do so, that the emergency fund is not going to be necessary to cover these things. You should be able to cover them out of your own income if the emergency is not that large. And so just redoing your budget to the point where you make the adjustment, you pay for the emergency, and don't have to touch your emergency fund is a fantastic thing. And I think it's something that we should do if we can, right? I think for most people, not touching the emergency fund is a very big deal, because that's kind of a setback, and then you have to go back and replenish the fund. If you can just take care of it out of your income over the course of a particular month, that'd be perfect. That'd be perfectly fine, and then you could move forward into the next month. But you have to know where you're making changes in your plan, because if you don't, then you'll end up overspending. You could be in the red for a month, right? You could overdraw on an account for a month, and that's absolutely not what we want. We want to make sure that our budgets, as flexible as they can be, are still quite stringent, right? We need to follow our budgets, right? But we just need to understand that certain things can occur in our lives that may set us back a bit, and may change the way that we look at a budget for a particular month. Ultimately, breaking your budget, and I tell people this all the time, breaking your budget once, or breaking your budget 1 month is not going to kill you, right? It is the habitual breaking of a budget that's going to kill you, right? It's the habitually not doing the right things and overspending and spending money on dumb stuff that's going to break you, because it may be the case that you gave in and purchase something compulsory, right? Like we said a little while ago, that can be something that we do. Let's say that you gave in and did that. Well, now you have less money to spend in other places. And so you're going to need to sit down and make sure that you can budget out the rest of the month. Okay. And still have that thing. If not, then we may need to go ahead and find a way to get a refund on that thing or to resell it or whatever. Right. And get back to a point where we have that cash on hand. Okay. But let's just be flexible, make adjustments. Okay, but if we can live by our budget, if we can be strict on our budget, and what we expect to happen at the beginning of the month is what actually happens throughout the course of the month, then perfectly fine, and you can move on in your financial life. But just be flexible, make adjustments, but actually make the adjustments. Don't just say in your mind, okay, I'm going to have to adjust this, that, or the other. No, actually sit down, take the time, write it out, talk to your spouse about it if you're married, and then you'll be better off as you move forward, knowing what's going on in your financial life. Now, the fifth budget hack that I have for you is to do some investigating. Okay, if you decide to make a purchase, do some digging first. Okay, obtain as much information as you can about the product, prices, return policy, warranties, options for payments, etc. Right? Chances are you'll find sales, special offers, and payment terms that can fit your budget. Now, payment terms are not a big deal for us because we're not financing things. We're not doing buy now, pay later. We're not doing things like that. But when it comes to sales, special offers, things like that, I like those words, right? I like getting lower prices. I like, finding a product that is the generic version of a particular product, but it costs a lot less, but it's basically the exact same thing, right? I like finding things like that. I like doing that digging because a lot of times we get caught up in a name brand. A lot of times we get caught up in the particular specs of one product, and we just think, oh, that's the only thing that does that thing, right? And we get really caught up and we go and we just buy it because we have to have it. And ultimately, it may not be the only product out there that does that. And it may be the most expensive of the products out there that does that because it's the most well-known. There's high demand, high prices, right? So I think we need to, and this is something, honestly, if I can tell you as far as purchasing things, something that I'm good at, this is something that I'm good at, right? I'm good at doing my homework. I'm good at doing some financial investigating. I'm good at, getting the best value for whatever I'm purchasing. Now, it may not be the best price at all times, right? But let's just say for a second, right? Let's say you are going online and you're ordering things, and online makes this a lot easier than in-store does. Okay, but let's say that you're going to order groceries online. Now, a lot of people do this now, and they go and pick up groceries. Now, a lot of people may pick up things for their kids, for their lunches or whatever, right? Or even just snacks to have around the house, things to have around the house. Well, something that I'm very good at is like on a per ounce basis, right? Measuring things on a per ounce basis. How much does this cost per ounce that we get? Or how much does this cost per serving that we get? Right? That way, not only can you find a good price, you can find something at a good value, right? Because you may have a small jar of peanut butter and a large jar of peanut butter, right? And those are going to have two different prices associated with them. But then the question is, what's the better value? Because if I know I'm going to eat that whole jar of peanut butter anyway, right? I know I'm going to get around to eating that entire jar. Wouldn't I want the jar that's the better value, meaning the lower cost per ounce of peanut butter that's in there, right? So do some financial investigating. And I'm not talking about on something just as small as peanut butter. That's something that, I may do, right? But that's not going to make a huge difference over time. Do this when it comes to bigger purchases, things that are going to have a little more financial standing in your life and are going to be things that you need to budget for specifically, and just get the best price and get the best value that you can. Get the best return policies, warranties, all these types of things, right? Find offers, find sales, find the best way to save yourself money, and by all means take advantage of them because they're hard to come by. But if you can find them, and they are out there, right? Even if it's an online coupon or something like that, that can save you some money, or a coupon code that can save you some money, then by all means take advantage of it, and you can save yourself some money. So that's another way to hack your budget, right? What is the sixth way, though, to hack your budget? Well, it is the thing that I tell you to do over and over again. It's the thing that I consider part of the budgeting process, because we can set aside what our income's going to be. We can set aside what our expenses are going to be, right? We can write this down at the beginning of the month, and we can follow it, and we can attempt to follow it, right? But how do we know if we're following it if we are not reviewing our expenses, right? We need to review our expenses. And my suggestion is that we should review our expenses on a monthly basis. Okay. Now, especially when you're early on in the financial action plan or any financial plan, and you're just starting to budget and you're just starting to, check all this out, you should be reviewing your expenses. Several times throughout the month. You should be reviewing your expenses so often that you get tired of looking. Okay. But ultimately, then you want to get to the point where maybe you can review your expenses on a monthly basis or every couple of months, just to make sure that you're staying on track with your budget. Right? Because you can budget all you want to. You can write it down. You can say what's going to happen. But if you do not stick to it, and if you do not have any type of accountability to sticking to that budget, then who's to say you need to stick to it? Right? Why would I stick to something that there's no accountability for? Right? Ultimately, if somebody told you, hey, I need you to go on this diet, right? But nobody's going to check on you. There's not going to be a scale. You're not going to be able to look in a mirror. You're not going to be able to try on pants. There's going to be no incentive, right? There's no incentive to go on this diet, but I need you to go on this diet. You'd be like, forget that diet, right? And the same thing goes when we're trying to clean up our financial lives. Many people think of it like a diet, a financial diet, right? And so if budgeting is akin to dieting, right, but there's no accountability to that diet, then how easy is it going to be to just say, forget that diet, forget that budget, right? If I'm not going to review what my expenses are, I'm not going to review what I actually spent on things relative to what I said I was going to spend on them, then that's something that is just useless, right? It's useless to budget at that particular point, okay? So we need to be reviewing our expenses and making sure that we know where our money is going, because if we don't, right, if we don't know where our money is going, then we're going to have problems. Now, those were the 6 budget hacks that I have for you, but I want to just add on a little something extra, and it kind of goes with reviewing your expenses, right? I think that not only should you be budgeting effectively and reviewing your expenses, something that's going to help you to be a good budgeter, be within your budget on a month-to-month basis, and then ultimately not just constantly miss on the amount of money that you spend in certain areas, is to be a conservative budgeter, right? Be somebody who gives yourself as much room as possible in certain areas. Now, I'm not saying that since you maybe could spend $1,000 on groceries that you should. No, you need to be realistic, right? When I say be conservative, I just mean round up. Right? If you know that, on a month-to-month basis, your electric bill is anywhere between, and, this is going to differ, but let's say you lived in an apartment and your electric bill is going to run between $80 and, sometimes $150, $160, right? Every month, I would say that my electric bill is $150, $160, right? I would take the upper range on any variable item. Right? Or when it comes to groceries, I would take, again, the upper range, or any eating out, I would take the upper range, right? Then what you would be able to do is budget all of your money given a worst case scenario month, right? Now, not a worst case scenario based on emergencies, but worst case scenario based on just high expenses, right? And then see what you have left over. And then if you end up actually spending less, which is very likely if you're budgeting conservatively, right, then you can stay within the budget and have extra money left over to make some considerations as far as what you want to do with it, right? And the same goes if you have variable income instead of rounding up, round down, right? If you have a sales job, then consider, if you don't have great months, and then any extra money, have a plan for what that extra money is going to be used for, okay? So just something a little extra to add on to the 6 budget hacks that I gave you here. Okay, so hopefully these help you, and hopefully you can put these things into play in your own life to help you to spend a certain amount of money that is going to be reasonable in your financial life, that can help you to keep up with the amount of money that you're actually spending, that can help you to keep up with what you're spending money on, and then can also help you to get great deals on things that you're ultimately going to spend money on anyway, right? Spending money is a fact of life, right? Spending money is one of our uses, right? We're going to give, we're going to save, we're going to spend, right? But if we're going to spend, we need to do so in a disciplined way. We need to do so in a way that is going to be, cost effective over time. And that does not mean not enjoying our money and not spending money on things that we like. It just means doing so in a way that's not going to break our budgets, and that can allow us at least to set a strong financial foundation as we begin this journey into a long-term financial plan that will help us to build wealth, and that will help us to be good money managers over time. So thanks for watching this video. If you could go down below, hit the big red subscribe button, like this video, leave me any feedback in the comments down below, and I'll be sure to respond to anything you leave down there. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave me a review on either one of those platforms. Follow me on social media at MNO with Dylan, and that's really good supplemental materials to all the things I'm putting out in these long form episodes on YouTube and the podcast every single day. And then if you need somebody to help you to build a financial plan and keep you accountable to that plan over the long term, then I can do that. Just DM me on any of the major social media sites and tell me that you are interested in financial coaching sessions, and you and I can begin working together, pushing towards your long-term financial goals and ultimately pushing you on towards long-term financial freedom, which is what I hope for every single individual watching or listening to the show on a day-to-day basis. So tune in tomorrow as I continue talking about personal finance topics that I think could be useful for you in your long-term financial journey. So thanks for tuning into this episode of Money's No Object. I'm your host, Dylan Howell. God bless.